All right. I am here with John Rood, the founder of Perceptual and the author of Beyond the Exit. How's it going, John?
It's going great, Steve. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to really unpack not only your successes, but also some of the pieces around what you're working on with exits. And before we get to all of that, let's talk about your background. What got you
Totally.
into business?
Yeah, it was kind of an accidental path for me. So I thought that I was going to be a lawyer, and then in college I decided I had to be an academic. So I was preparing to be an academic, and then I realized that I was not going to be one of the top like five people to get a PhD in my field in a given year. So I'd better think of something else to do. So I did the thing that smart people do when they don't know what else to do in life, which is go into management consulting. So I did that for 3 years. It was actually a really great experience. I had a wonderful time in consulting. And at the end of that time, I realized I just like it was just time to move on. People are not supposed to be in junior management consulting roles forever. And I'd had some experience in the test preparation world. I'd worked for a company called Kaplan. If you've studied for SAT or ACT, or you've had a kid who's done that in the last 20 years, you probably heard of Kaplan before. So I had taught there really briefly, and I'd kind of figured out the insight that everyone who works there figures out eventually, which is that they're really charging people a lot for your labor. Like they were paying me $20 an hour and probably charging my class something like $300 or $400 an hour for me to be there. So I decided that I would start a little test preparation tutoring company. And if it worked, that would be great. And if it didn't work, I'd just go to business school. And fortunately for me, it worked.
Nice. Very nice. So after that, what was the first venture that you kicked off?
So that was my first venture, was my tutoring company. I ran that for 8 years. We started helping kids pass the law school admission test, which I knew really well. But then by the end of that time, what we had built was kind of like the second or third biggest, kind of tied for second or third biggest provider of pre-medical and pre-health test preparation services. So we had tutoring programs, we had print publications, we had online practice tests, online courses, the whole gamut.
Got it. I thought those were two separate companies. Okay, cool. So very interesting. And what types of things were you guys tracking at the tutor company? Was it number of students tutored? Was it revenue? Was it amount of connections that you're making? What did that look like?
I would say, Steve, it was definitely revenue for sure. Yeah, I was always very metrics driven. By the end of the time in that business, we were running a system called EOS from the book Traction that probably a lot of people here will have heard of. So we did KPIs, we did quarterly planning sessions, we did the whole thing.
Nice, nice. And when it came down to like the being prepared for the exit that happened, you said you're measuring KPIs. What types of tips could you give people that are listening around preparing a tutoring business like that for an exit?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think it's a couple things. And I think what it all comes down to is that people that want to sell their business have got to be thinking about who the buyer is and what kind of story they're going to tell. So we ended up selling to private equity, and private equity cares, to really simplify things. I mean, they care about margin, they care about your earnings, and they care about your growth rate. And of course, there's more detail to it, right? So your company is worth more if you're in a big market. Your company is worth more if there's more automation, more technology, and your company is worth more if you can tell the story about where you can take it. So if you're in a small market that you totally dominate, and that's a good business to have for sure. But it's almost better to be in a business where you can kind of credibly represent to the next buyer, like, hey, I've taken it this far in this market, but there's still a long way to go for the next buyer to grow the company.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I really like the concept of you go from selling your company to customers to selling it to an acquiring company of their vision, like how it fits into their future. So it's such an interesting mindset shift. And how did initial conversations begin with the exit?
Yeah, great question. So I had a mentor who was on the board of my company. I had like a crazy early board of directors. It was pretty informal. They didn't have any control, but I had great advisors. And so one summer, one of my advisors knew a bunch of guys in private equity and kind of just like took me around. And I'm based in Chicago. He was based in Chicago. There's a lot of private equity firms here, so he kind of took me around and said like, hey, just meet with these guys. You're too small to buy today, but it's nice to have those relationships.
Hmm.
And then ultimately, one of those relationships that we had built turned out to be our buyer. They were putting together a roll up in our industry. We ended up thinking it made a lot of sense. But thought there was good growth ahead of us, and ended up being getting a lot of cash out, but still being significant investors in that company going forward. And we thought that was a good opportunity.
Nice. And this is a good chance to talk about roll-ups for a second. Could you walk us through, for people that aren't familiar with a roll-up, what that is and how it works?
Yeah, sure thing. So, I mean, a roll up is basically putting a bunch of smaller businesses together in some kind of a way that makes sense. And there's a lot of ways that you can think about it. One of them is think about it from geography. So, think about like a home services company like lawn care or pool maintenance or whatever. You buy a company that it's the number one provider of pool maintenance in, Akron, Ohio, or whatever. And now you're going to go buy the top provider of that service in Austin, Tampa, Kansas City, whatever, and then you're going to run them together. So that's one way to think about it. Ours was kind of like a roll up of different verticals. So we were a really strong provider, as I had mentioned, of pre-health tutoring and test preparation products, and they put us together with another vertical in the test preparation space, with the idea that we will continue to add more verticals over time.
Cool. Very cool. Thanks for the quick explanation. I always like to bring it to the basics
Sure thing.
on on here. So you go through the process with that buyer. What was that like? Was it 6 months? Was it a year? How long did it take?
I think we had started engaging with them seriously in October, and then made the decision in probably January or February of the following year. And then we closed on April 4th, I believe, of that year. So, kind of from the time that we had like basically made the decision, like there were still negotiating points to the time that we closed, it was probably 3 months.
Hmm.
It was a long 3 months. Like it's really hard to sell a business for folks out there that haven't done it. And I know it depends on kind of the size of the business too. And we had a mid-sized business. We were several $1 million in earnings, so not huge, but not tiny. So there was a lot to do. There were a lot of lawyers, lots of accountants, lots of documents, lots of meetings. And while you're doing that stuff, you have to make sure to not ruin your business that you are currently running while you try to sell it.
Yeah, yeah. You got to juggle both
Absolutely.
while going through it. So you go through with the transaction, and you mentioned that you were there for a little while. I believe it was 2 years, was what you'd
Yeah.
mentioned. Okay, and did the whole
Yeah.
team come over with you?
Yeah, so this was two companies that kind of got smushed together, and that's we had talked about kind of what a roll up is, and that's what a roll up is you take a bunch of teams and put them together and try to do it in a logical and rational way. So I did that for 2 years. That wasn't an easy time for me, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs that I know, that's not an easy time. Like I think that most of us become entrepreneurs for some combination of we're bad at being employees. We're bad at listening to others. We need to be in charge. We don't want to have to go to someone else for approval for us to like buy a new stapler or whatever. Like basically all the reasons why people want to be entrepreneurs in the first place are the reasons why it's kind of hard to have a boss. So that's a time that I've talking to lots of different entrepreneurs, like, and definitely for myself, like that's a hard time to go through.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Going from also a small team to often very large groups of people with bureaucracy and things like that all at once. So not only have you gone through a change with the what you were doing, but you're in a whole new world basically with all these different people, and it can be very challenging. So
Exactly.
you go through the transaction afterwards, and what happens after the exit and you're gone from the roll up?
So I spent, as you had said, I spent 2 years there. I got out of that, and then the weirdest thing happened in retrospect. It's weird now to me, but it wasn't weird to me then. I don't think I really thought about what I was going to do, like with the rest of my life. Like I thought that I would enjoy having a bunch of money. I thought I would enjoy having freedom in quotation marks, but I don't think I'd really thought what would that be, right? Would I just like sit around all day? Would I like golf? Like what would I do with my time? Also, that this is also very common among entrepreneurs for us to not like think very hard about it. So I got out of my business. I thought I'll take a little time off. I ended up leaving that company right before the holidays at the end of the year. So did the holidays. January, February, went on a big trip with my family, and then March, COVID hits, right? So
Hmm.
then I basically like raised my two small kids for 6 months. We didn't have any. We didn't have like the any childcare. We didn't have any school, anything like that. And then after that, it was kind of time to think about what else to do with the rest of my life. So that was its own process, but um, definitely was good to take some time off. I think it's hard for entrepreneurs to take time off. It was hard for me. Like we're not built that way, and we're used to recharging our batteries when we have like a weekend where we don't have to work, or where if we get like a 3 day vacation or something, like we feel like, man, that was really great. I really got a lot of time off. So it's just not something that entrepreneurs are usually built for.
Hmm. Yeah. Well said. Well said. So that shifts gears to kind of what you're doing now, where you've been an author for a little while now. What can you talk about within terms of what you're working on?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I'm working on two projects. So I've got my company, which is in the HR compliance space, which we're happy to talk about later. But I'm putting this book together. This book is called Beyond the Exit, and it's exactly the story of what we've been talking about. And I remember I left my company. I didn't know what to do, and I went through uncertainty. I went through depression. I went through really serious chronic illness. I got long COVID during that time, and a lot of people get long COVID and like have not sold a business. So I don't think that those are related, but just like this like period of not knowing what was going on in life and not knowing what to do with my time. And so I put together a book, and I'm sending it to my editor in 3 weeks. We're recording this in February, so in 3 weeks, if it's not on my editor's desk, everyone should hold me accountable. It'll come out later this year, but it's my story of that. But it's also I interviewed 71 other entrepreneurs about going through this process, and it's really our story is the way that I've tried to think about it. Of what is it like to leave your business, and almost like irregardless of like the money or the finances, like that stuff is important, but thinking through, for people who have spent their entire careers like running as fast as they possibly can, being like super type A, what does it mean to slow down? Like what does it mean to go from your Friday's your last day at the office, and you have 17 meetings and all this other stuff going on, and then Monday morning you wake up and there's nothing on your calendar? Like what is that process like? So that's what I'm writing about.
Nice, very nice. Representing the entrepreneurs out there. I like that for sure. And I think that the abrupt stop is quite terrifying to a lot of people because the type of individual you have to become to go through this sort of chaotic experience of an exit is the type of individual that just doesn't really fit with sitting on a beach for months. It just doesn't.
Yes,
It
correct.
doesn't compute.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. So that's really interesting. So, what are some of the characteristics that you found out of the 70 people that you've talked to that you could share?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of overlap in our experiences, first of all, which I don't think I knew that at the time. Like I had, I didn't grow up as an entrepreneur. I didn't grow up as a business person, and certainly, I knew other entrepreneurs through my network, through Entrepreneurs Organization, which I was a member of for a long time. But I just didn't know a lot of people who had gone through that process. So just knowing what that process was going to be like was important. And I think that a couple takeaways that I would give the audience, especially for folks that are that are going to go through this, like who are going to sell their business in the near future. Number one is the people that thought hard about what they wanted the rest of their life to look like were always way happier. And that seems so obvious, but what a lot of people don't understand about the sales experience is that, look, some people sell their company in a really thoughtful way, and they say, I'm going to grow this business for 7 years, and then the eighth year I'm going to hire a banker and we're going to do a year-long process, and then I'm going to leave. Those people are in the extreme minority. The majority of people are the people that are running their business and they get an unsolicited offer. So I've got a friend, James Marciano, who has trademarked. He told me to say it's trademarked. He's trademarked this abbreviation UFO, unsolicited flattering offer. Right. So you get an offer from a competitor, you get an offer from private equity, you get an offer from from a search firm or from a search fund type person, um, and then if you decide to take it, then you're off to the races. And the time from, and we described this earlier, from deciding to accept an offer to closing on your business, there's no downtime. It's all lawyers, bankers, actually trying to run your company, telling your team, talking to your family about what's happening. And there's no time where you're like, well, wait a second, like everybody stop. I'm going to go like to Hilton Head for a week and just think about my life. Like that's not a thing that happens, right? So the people have thought really extensively about like, what is this chapter in my life in the middle? Hopefully it's the middle of our life. What does it mean? What happens after? Those people are much happier. So that's one. I'll pause there, but that was one of my key takeaways.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. Thinking about the future, because there's so many people that I've talked to on this podcast that have really shared a lot of characteristics. Like helping other entrepreneurs is one that comes up regularly, where they've gone through it and they want to help other people go through it, just because they've kind of had the scars to help people avoid all these things. And one of my favorite ones was, I believe it was um, the head of the Northeast entrepreneur department. And she was on this podcast and we talked about it. And they studied, I think it was 1,000 entrepreneurs. And the top characteristics of everyone was a low prudence. So you you were basically breaking the rules on a regular basis. You had
Hmm.
trouble with authority, and they could identify it at a younger age of kids that were more likely to say like, "Hey, this system's actually broken right here. Why isn't somebody fixing that?" And they would, get into conflict because of it and all this stuff. But I think it's truly fun to see the similar characteristics, because often you feel like an outlier. You feel like a kind of an outcast when you're not hireable and all these kind of crazy, quirky things. But it's important to know that there's others out there.
Yes, yes. There's many others out there. My favorite thing about entrepreneurs that I've learned, I learned this term a little while ago, is that we have an internal locus of authority, meaning that we have the belief that things that happen to us in our life we control. And that's one of those things. It's like, maybe you remember, like the study came out like a year or two ago that said that like some huge percentage of the population doesn't have an internal monologue. Like they don't have thoughts running through their head. And I'm like,
Hmm.
what? How is that possible? I feel the same way for people that don't have that internal kind of locus of control. Like a lot of people, and probably most people, think that the things that kind of happen to them in their life are because of things that are out of their control. And sometimes that's true, right? So like people who are in a war zone or whatever, right? Or like they suffer like a terrible illness, like obviously that's not within your control. But entrepreneurs really think that, from my experience at least, like things that happen to us, like we cause those things to happen.
Mm.
And so it can be a real challenge to get to a point in life where it's like, wait a second, you don't have to make anything happen anymore. Like you're just okay as you are. And then that's like surprisingly hard for people to handle.
Well said. Well said. Well, that takes us to the finale question of knowing what you know now. What would you tell John 10 years ago?
Um, I would say two things. So number one, I would say grow faster. So from a business perspective, I think that there are things that if I would have known that this was a chapter of life, that I could have accomplished that chapter more quickly and then kind of gotten on to the next thing. I think that having one business that was successful that you like were able to exit under your belt is such an incredible unlock for entrepreneurs. And I've interviewed a number of entrepreneurs that sold businesses for like objectively large amounts, but like comparatively small amounts, right? So if you sell a business for $500,000 or something like that, like that is such an amazing accomplishment in life and gives you so much more ability to kind of like do whatever you want for the next chapter, that like getting to that point is a really, really big accomplishment.
Hmm. I like that. Knowing that it's a chapter, focusing on
Exactly.
that it's a chapter. And that goes to what you're saying about looking into the future, planning what your life looks like, your optimal life, and being in control of that. I think that's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about what you're working on now. You're working on a project in the AI space. Is that right?
Yeah. So last year I started this little company. It's called Perceptual, and we do compliance with these emerging sets of AI regulations. So, like, if you're people are interested in AI, like you read about how should government regulate AI, and then government then regulates AI. Sometimes wisely, sometimes imprudently, and then companies have to deal with that. And so we've put together kind of the process and the technology to help companies comply with those rules. So that's what I'm doing, kind of like day job wise, and then also working on the book project.
Very cool. Very cool. So shifting back to the book, where can people go and learn more?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So they can go to beyondtheexitbook.com if you want to go there. And it's just a quick landing page. I put it up myself in about 2 hours, so it does not look good today. Hopefully, by the time people listen, it looks a lot better. But sign up there just to get updates. I'm going to be sending out updates on the book itself, but I interviewed so many people. I can't put everyone's stories in the book. So I'm going to be sending out like a newsletter with stories of entrepreneurs who have exited their business. Hopefully will resonate with this audience. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm just at John Rood.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, those are all the questions that I have for you, John. And everybody listening on iTunes or Spotify, the links that John mentioned will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thanks, Steve. It was super fun. I appreciate it.